Hi folks, how we doing? I'm the Reverend Danny Crosby, a Unitarian minister serving congregations in Altrincham and in Urmston in the northwest of England. I do hope you're finding the love and that you're witnessing the blessings in life in these difficult times. It's hard, my friends, I know, but we're all in this together. So I'm offering these devotions as my little bit of hope, doing what I can do, playing my role, being a part of the solution. These devotions are offered as a balm for the heart, for the mind, for the spirit and for the soul. And the title for today's devotion is Prepare for Surprise. Sounds a bit odd, doesn't it? Well, let's see what it's about, So I invite us just to still ourselves. Let's invite a loving presence to be here amongst us and to awaken from deep, deep within us. I have lit the flame of freedom in this cup of belonging, acceptance and love. We join together in our physical separation, but united in our devotion to life and to love. Help us to sing for joy, like the birds each morning sing their faith in being alive and being here. May we open our sense to all that surrounds us. Help us to see the blessings in the world as well as life's sufferings too. May our hearts be open to the love that is present in life, but also not close to its pain. Unshield our hearts, for life and love are vulnerable states of being, but they're open to love. May our minds remain open to new truths and never to be slaves to what we think we know. And may our hands remain open so that we can do the work that needs to be done, to offer healing and to offer love in those places where love and healing are needed. Amen. Robbie Burns famously wrote, "The best laid schemes of mice and men go often askew and leave us nothing but grief and pain for promised joy." No matter how carefully we plan and scheme, life never works out exactly as we would like it to. Life is full of surprises, some amazing, some terrible. Life is awry. Or do I mean incredible? I'm not quite sure. It never works out the way. It's unusual in so many ways. It never works out how we think it will, ever. Brother David Stein Rast said, "Another name for God is surprise." Ah yes, as I've heard it said, the God of surprises. Isn't that the nature of life? Surprise? Doesn't surprise get you all the time? Aren't you constantly surprised? I am. It fills me with awe. I've been thinking a lot about surprise recently. I've also been thinking about how we respond to life. How the things that happen to us shape our lives in incredible ways. How many times in life have we received that phone call? That phone call that has changed our lives forever. The last phone call you wanted to hear. How many times? I remember receiving one such phone call just over 2 years ago when my sister called me broken. She called to inform me that our stepbrother Daniel had taken his own life. It was a moment of numbing shock. It was far more than surprise. At Daniel's funeral, I talked with many, many people. One conversation in particular stood out. It was with an old friend, someone I'd known for 40 years probably. I'd not seen him for a long time though. During the conversation, he asked me about the work that I do. I told him, and he informed me that he calls himself a born-again atheist. He talked about church parade, etc. when we were Cub Scouts together. and his early encounters with religion. He then began to talk about his family, of him nursing his father while his father was dying. He talked of the death of his own son in a car accident. He spoke of his stepchildren and he spoke of his mother. He spoke of his physical difficulties and the amount of opiate-based painkillers he has to take each day just to function. And we spoke together of old friends and times gone by. And then he wished me well in my ministry. There was so much love in that conversation, but also so much pain, so much loss in just a conversation. That day was a day filled with conversations, conversations about love, conversations about loss. But then that is the nature of grief, is it not? Love and loss. Like all of us, there have been other similar moments in my life when I've received devastating news about those I love. I've responded in many different ways. There were times when I turned away from life in total despair. I rarely do that these days. These days I usually turn towards the divine and back toward life. That brings me back toward life, really. Might seem strange to some, but it's actually in the hardest, darkest, most painful times that I experience the divine most intensely. That's when I truly feel that God is with us. Now, the God of my limited understanding is not the controller of life. Instead, I find God with me more in the suffering, but I do find God in joy too. But it seems less intense, for joy seems to be more of my experience. But I do find that divine love at the heart of all experience, at the heart of all life. I can't explain this to you. Please don't ask me. I'm doing my best. I can only ever share my experience. And all I can do is sit or stand or be in awe. In awe at life. In awe at everything. Life fills me with awe. It is awful in the true meaning of the word. It surprises me constantly. Now we live in an almost death-defying age, something I expect that this current crisis probably has brought to question, actually. Maybe that's humbled us. I think I understand why we deny our mortality. I know such temptations. But by denying such realities, we do not transcend the sufferings that loss brings. All we really do is block ourselves off from the joy that comes with truly living. In so doing, we also deny the love and the depth of meaning that comes with truly living, with truly being alive. Life, love and death is meant to fill us with awe, for life is truly awful. Life is meant to fill us with awe. We are meant to be filled with awe. In the old meaning of the word, that is. Awful used to mean what awesome means now, but 1,000-fold. But for some reason it means the opposite now, awful. It means to be filled with awe. But we don't like it. We like to be in control. Now, while we live in a world that seems to try to sanitize suffering, we see ever more violence on our screens that we spend ever more time staring into. Our entertainment seems to be ever more violent, punctuated by advertising. How many times have I sat on an evening recently or over time looking for something to watch on Netflix and actually struggling to find anything I really want to watch? So much of what passes for entertainment is just full of murder, intrigue and violence. And you know what? Most of the stories are pretty predictable. They're not very surprising at all. I've noticed that virtually every film I've watched recently has been so predictable I've worked out the plot twists in about the first 10 minutes. It's good when you find something that doesn't do that. I long for surprise, I think, sometimes. Why do we sanitize life? And death almost. Becomes almost unreal at times. And maybe, shockingly, it's been brought to our attention more in recent times. But when we live in such a sanitized state, life doesn't touch us anymore. And life's supposed to touch you deeply. It's meant to constantly surprise you. It's meant to fill you with awe. Life's awful in the old meaning of the word. It's also wonderful. But we don't want this. We don't want surprise. We want to know what's coming. We want to prepare for what's coming. We want to know. We want to prepare ourselves for what's coming. And what was that phrase that the character played by John Cleese in that wonderful film from my childhood, Clockwise? What was it that he cried out? It's not the despair. I can live with the despair. It's the hope that destroys you. Seems that in the film, if he could have just given in, it would have been easier. But hope kept rearing its head. And he kept on going on and on and on. I can handle the despair. It's the hope that destroys you. Funny, isn't it? Typical John Cleese, I think. A while ago, a friend sent the following story to me, told by Roger Housen. It's found in 10 Poems to Change Your Life. There's a Jewish story saying that when you're about to be born, God takes you to a field covered with bundles. Each bundle represents a particular set of troubles. You can choose any bundle, but the one you choose you have to take to earth with you. The rabbis say that if, at the moment of death, God were to take you back to the field and let you choose another bundle with which to relive your life, you would always pick the same one. We like to know what's coming. By the way, there's no doubt we would do the same thing with our bundles of joy too. When I think of all the things we fear in life, it is surprise that we fear the most. We want to know what's coming, even if it's a bundle of troubles. We fear surprise the most. We want to know what's coming so we can prepare. But life doesn't come like that. We weren't prepared for this, were we not? So many folks spend so much of their time finding ways to avoid suffering and pain that are a part of life. It seems we can only really bear to look at these things through our screens and our devices. We can't bear to see it, the real thing. But that's going against the nature of life, as life is meant to be. Life is full of surprises. They move us, the surprises change us. Life constantly surprises me. I remember that before Daniel's funeral, I was apprehensive about what might occur. I was worried about what might happen, by how the people might be with each other. Yet when the day came, I was pleasantly surprised. Actually, I was more than pleasantly surprised. I was deeply moved by the expressions of love and the expressions of healing by so many people. Felt like I was bearing witness to miracles. Yeah, it surprised me, it awed me, and life constantly awes me. I often find myself trembling in awe at life. It makes me feel incredibly alive. Awe is perhaps the ultimate form of surprise. When we are stirred by awe, it's so unfathomable, vast, and so complex that we can't quite believe what's happening. Like all forms of surprise, awe makes us stop. It awakens something within us and it shifts our perspective. It changes and it makes us want to share our experience with others. And sadly these days, so many of us want to freeze the moment. Take out our phones, don't we? We want to take a picture of what's happening in our lives. But you can't capture a moment of life. You can't capture life. It's untamable. It's ungovernable. All we can do is open ourselves to the vastness that is living. The most dangerous thing in life is the ability to predict what's coming, because it'll stop you living. It will freeze you completely in the moment, and no one should live like that. We don't live in the moment, we live through the moment. In fact, if anything, the moment moves through us. It's not that we move through it. Maybe it moves through us. You don't live in the moment. That's passive. That's freeze frame. And yet they tell us to live in the moment. No, maybe live by the moment, through the moment, or let the moment live through you, but don't live in it. You're trapped, and that's no way to live. We cannot predict the future. None of us know what is coming. If we could, we would probably do all we could to avoid it, and thus commit the ultimate of sin, to live an unlived life. That's the ultimate of sin, you know, to not live the life you've been given. All we can do is open ourselves to the God of surprises and be filled by the awe of life. Life should fill you with awe, because it's truly awe-filled. It's literally awful. But it's not how you think it is. Life's meant to be awry. We're meant to be surprised by it. We cannot prepare ourselves for life. All we can actually prepare ourselves for is the fact that we're always going to be surprised and filled with awe. It's all you can prepare yourself. So prepare yourself to be surprised. The only way to do this is to be open and remain open. And when we begin to close down, close in, to open ourselves, don't be trapped in it. To live our lives fully alive is to find ourselves constantly trembling in awe at the amazement of life. Life is the ultimate miracle if you think about it. Life is just amazing. It's amazing that we live at all, actually. We're beating the odds just being here breathing. And it should always stir us and surprise us, this. It should move us. It should ultimately, it should surprise. We should be surprised by every breath. Because it's a miracle. We're beating the odds just being here. But we don't live that way, do we? We don't live that way. We want to freeze frame the moment. We want to live in the moment instead of letting the moment live through and in us. Be alive, bring it to life. Wouldn't that be a surprise? To be fully alive. Anyway, I think I've gone on enough today. I'm going to end with a wonderful, perhaps something that's awful actually, something awful. It certainly fills me with awe and wonder, these ending words. It's a kind of quotation by one of the greats of the 20th century, the Jewish mystic Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, one of the greats of the 20th century. Heschel was a contemporary of the great 20th century theologian Reinhold Niebuhr. He was one of his closest friends, actually. And he marched with Martin Luther King at Selma, Martin Luther King Jr. at Selma. They were great friends and contemporaries in the civil rights movement of the 60s. And when he introduced King as the keynote speaker to the rabbinical assembly, the conservative rabbis sang, "We shall overcome." But they sang it to him in Hebrew. They sang it to him in the language of the biblical prophets, who both King and Heschel came to embody for their generation. Dr. King was meant to share the Passover Seder dinner with the Heschel family, but was murdered just 2 weeks after giving that speech. Over 50 years ago now. And what's changed since? Well, some things have and some things haven't. But there's so much more that needs to change. But don't be surprised if it doesn't. If it does or it doesn't. It's up to us, you know. We are responsible. To truly live our lives, we need to be stirred by awe and wonder every day. Don't try and freeze the moment to passively live in it. Let the moment live in and through you. You bring it to life by your being. Be awake and alive to it. I suspect Heschel believed in the God of surprises, and that divine is with us in our suffering, and that we bring that love alive when we stand with others in theirs. So here's that quotation that I'd just like to end with. I would say about individuals, an individual dies when he ceases to be surprised. What keeps me alive spiritually, emotionally, intellectually is my ability to be surprised. I say, I take nothing for granted. I am surprised every morning when I see the sun shine again. When I see an act of evil, I am not accommodated. I don't accommodate myself to the violence that goes on everywhere. I'm still surprised. That's why I'm against it, why I can fight against it. We must learn how to be surprised, how not to adjust ourselves. I am the most maladjusted person in society. So, lots of surprises here. You may not have expected some of these things from me today. Good. I'm glad. You should be surprised. So let's attempt to be more maladjusted to life, to live in constant surprise, and to stand side by side with one another in total awe. Let's sing the song. Let's sing the song of total amazement at life, a song of praise, which is the only true prayer of life, you know. How many of our prayers are songs of praise, I wonder? Or are we just asking for things? How often do we say thank you? That would be quite a surprise, wouldn't it? Something to think about as I leave you now. So we're going to end with a final blessing. And you know we need to bless more. How surprised would someone be if you just walked up to them and blessed them? Why not try it? Even if you have to do it through your computer screen. Go around blessing folk for a day. See how surprising that day might end. Give that a go, eh? Give it a go. You might enjoy it. They might bless you back. What would that be like, eh? If we just went around blessing each other constantly, what would life be like, eh? Might surprise you. But I'm going to end with a final blessing because we need to bless more and we can all bless. And how do we bless? By giving our whole hearts to life. So these are some final words of blessing. Go now in love, a love for life, a love for one another, a love for self, and a love for God. And may we carry this love with us in all that we feel, in all that we think, in all that we say, in all that we do. Be surprised by life. Amen.